Okay. Alright. Hi. Welcome back. We're talking about empiricism. 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 You don't believe in isms? I just believe in me. No. That's silly. John Lennon was a great musician, but he was kind of stupid. Sorry. He was. Anyway, this is yet another in our discussions of epistemology. And I had a whole other empiricism video recorded, but I didn't have sound because I'm foolish. And there's really nothing else to that. I'm foolish. So here we are again. Empiricism. That joke's getting old. Alright. Last time we talked about rationalism, and rationalism specifically as one theory of which beliefs are justified. The rationalists held that a belief was only justified if it was known certainly to be true, if it was analytically or deductively true. All deductively true beliefs are analytically true as well. Anyway, on a sufficient analysis. Anyway, the rationalists thought that there were certain beliefs that were analytically true, such as I know that I exist. That's analytically true. Because if I know something, there must be someone there to do the knowing. Right? I think, therefore I am. And they thought that, of course, mathematical truths and definitional truths, those are obviously justified. But that left them in something of a quandary as far as things like my keys are on the table. It's not definitionally true. My keys could be somewhere else. And it's not transcendentally true in the way that I think, therefore I am is. A transcendental truth is one where the terms of the premise make it true. You don't have to worry about that. That's a little beyond you. Anyway, the point is, they were left in something of a quandary. Could we have knowledge of the external world? Things like, my keys are on the table. The kinds of things that we want to be able to say that we know. Because if I didn't know those things, ordinary life would get very weird very quick. Right? So they had to claim that it was true by definition that I could count on certain things, like I could count on the deliverance of my senses. Descartes accomplished this by claiming that God, and the Christian God specifically, God exists, is true by definition, and therefore certainly analytically true. And that from this, you can derive certain other premises that are immediate analytical consequences of this, including I can trust my senses. Now, we talked in the last video about how that didn't really work out. The point is, a number of people were dissatisfied with this, were dissatisfied with the general program of the rationalists. Many rationalists attempted to give their own accounts of how you could have knowledge of the outside world and still hold on to their idea that knowledge had to be deductively, certainly true. That it was always, if it was justified, you knew for a fact it was true. Because that just makes sense to them. If I'm justified in believing it, it's got to be right, right? It's got to be true. It can't be the case that I could be justified in believing something and it not be true. That very idea was, scary to them. But along come the empiricists, starting with John Locke, an English philosopher. The empiricists had an entirely different approach. Now, Descartes thought that we had certain, what you might call innate ideas. There were certain things just preloaded in our brain, like God exists, the knowledge of the divine was inherent to being human. He thought God put those innate ideas there, and therefore we could trust them, that we could know by definition that they were true. Locke, on the other hand, said, no, babies come into the world as blank slates, tabula rasa in the Latin, a blank slate, minds completely free and clear of any knowledge. And they learn everything that they know. And how do they do this? Well, through the operation of their senses. The first thing that they do is they get ideas in their head via their senses. And the first ideas they get are simple ideas, like shapes and colors. For Locke, a simple idea was irreducible to something else. Like the idea of the color blue. Like, what's it made up of? It's made up of blue. I'm not talking about wavelengths of light. That's a separate idea. When I look at blue, I just see blue. Right? It's just blue. Or round as a shape. It's just round. That's what it is. Round. The senses would help the mind form, would be responsible for forming in the mind simple ideas, like shapes, colors, basic sounds, etc. And then gradually, as the baby got older and its brain developed further, it would start to form what Locke called complex ideas. Complex ideas are bunches of simple ideas put together to form something larger, to refer to something else. For instance, mama, right? A baby goes, mama, mama. I don't know why my baby talks like that. Mama. A baby says, mama, because it recognizes a certain complex of shapes and colors and sounds that it associates with mama. That's what is affixed to that. How does it learn the word? Well, probably from its mother, right? The mother keeps saying, I'm mama, and it associates that word with those sensory inputs, right? If you're not an English speaker, you learn another word for it, right? If you speak French, you learn mère. If you speak German, you learn Mutter. So complex ideas are conglomerations of simple ideas with a name attached to them, a name and a concept attached to them. Like kitty. Kitty. You learn about the shapes and the colors of a cat and the sounds of a cat. You go, kitty. There you go. Okay. So far, so good. Now, of course, epistemology, and our discussion so far, is about knowledge. Knowledge is about having true beliefs that are justified, at least for the purposes of this class. Why would we think we are justified in believing that those shapes and colors all put together are in fact a kitty. Well, Locke said just because it usually is, right? Contrary, I mean, Descartes started off by doubting his senses, if you read the reading. If you read the reading, read the readings. If you read the reading, Descartes started off by doubting his senses. And he eventually got to the point where he trusted them, but he had to include a whole extra argument, a whole extra premise about how God was definitionally real. And because of that, you can trust your senses. You can't just trust your senses because of your senses. You can trust them because of God. Locke skipped all that entirely. He said, look, he said, we can trust our senses because it's the only game in town, right? That quote comes, by the way, from the cowboy days, and specifically the Kansas cow towns, where there was a gambler whose name escapes me at the moment, who was playing in a card game in one of these Kansas cow towns. Might have been Dodge City, might have been somewhere else. And it was widely known that the dealer cheated, the game was rigged. And people said to him, don't you know this game is rigged? He said, of course I know it's rigged, but it's the only game in town, right? He wanted to gamble, he wanted to play, and he didn't care if the game was rigged. He wanted that badly to play. Locke had a similar opinion about our senses. He said, yeah, our senses do lie to us in all kinds of ways. He said, take a stick and push it partially underwater. And the stick looks like it's bent, right? Because of the refraction in the water. And he says, we know it isn't. We know the stick is straight. We know it's not bent. Our senses are lying to us. But you know what? C'est la vie. That's life. Such is life. What are you going to do? You can't quit. Your senses are all you got. Right? You're stuck with them. They're the only game in town. The game is rigged, but they're the only game in town. He said, okay. So we're justified in believing them because generally speaking, they are good enough. Right? Generally speaking, if I see a bunch of shapes and colors and hear a bunch of sounds that are associated with a cat, I'm justified in thinking that's a kitty because I've learned over many years and a lot of practice to properly associate those inputs with that concept. In other words, what Locke is saying is there's a cat out there, light bounces off of it, the light goes into my face, the physics goes in my face, it does stuff through the optic nerve and goes into my brain, and I form a belief that's a cat. Why is the belief that is a cat justified? Well, because more often than not, it's going to be a cat. When I have those particular inputs, when I form a belief based on that, more often than not, it's going to be a cat. It's that simple. Now, this would have driven Descartes stark raving bonkers, right? Locke is completely giving up on the idea that justification is necessarily connected to truth. For Descartes, it was obvious to him that something could only be justified if it was certainly true. That's why he felt that deductive and analytically true statements were justified, were the only things that were justified. But for Locke, something can be justified without necessarily being true. I mean, what if I looked over there and I saw what I thought was a cat and it turned out to be a small dog? Or a Halloween cat, like a little stuffed thing, a decoration. Like, oh, look at that cat. Oh, no, that's just a decoration, right? What if it was an optical illusion? What if it was a special thing put there specifically to make me think it was a cat, right? You know, they put a little cardboard cutout and they put a little recorder on the back of it and make me think, you know, played noises, so I think it's a cat. Put it at a distance. Oh, kitty! And I run over toward it, and the big box goes over and traps me, because that's the surest way to trap me, right? Like aliens want to capture me, just put a cat out there, I'm going to go, oh, kitty, and run towards it. Revealing too much about myself here. But seriously, it could be false. I can get the physics in my face and form the belief there's a cat over there and still be wrong. The belief might be false and yet still justified because my senses are usually justified. No, Descartes would have just stroked out. He would have been just had an apoplectic fit over that. But Locke and the other empiricists held fast to this line. They felt it explained the way the world actually worked much better than this weird Cartesian concept where you have to believe in God before you can be sure that you have any knowledge. You know, like if I said, you know, do you know that the keys are on the table? And you're like, well, I don't know. Do I believe in God? That sounds a little bonky, right? The empiricist said, you don't have to mess with any of that. Do you know that the keys are on the table? Yeah, you looked over there. The light bounces off of them. The physics go in your face. Your brain forms a belief. That's a table. Those are my keys. The keys are on the table. I'm justifying that belief. And if it happens to also be true, I know it. Philosophy. Okay. So that's the basic outline of empiricism. How do we know which beliefs are justified? Well, beliefs are justified when they are properly coordinated with the ideas in our mind as generated by our senses. Okay, good deal. Let's get into a few permutations and sort of see where this leads us. All right. Now, the first problem that crops up with empiricism is how do I get ideas about things that my senses can't perceive? Like, for instance, I can perceive cats, individual cats. I've got 4 of them. Sometimes they're all around me at once. It's very distressing, especially when they're meowing for food. I feel like they're going to eat me. But I can look at them and I go, cat, 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 cat. I can perceive them all individually. But how do I perceive the category of cat? Right? How do I perceive this concept, this idea of what the class that they belong to, the class of cat? It's not empirical. I can never directly observe. I can observe individual cats. I can never directly observe cat as a category. This is troubling. And honestly, dealing with these kinds of conceptual issues is one of the things that pushed the rationalists toward their view. But the empiricists have an answer. They say, look, some complex concepts map directly onto sensory inputs, right? These are concrete, complex concepts. I get physics in my face. It's a bunch of simple ideas all hooked together by their location in time and space. And I identify it as a cat, and I am identifying the concrete, complex concept of cat. It is a real, concrete, existing thing out there where my 5 senses can pick it up. Okay. But there are also abstract concepts. How do I get to an abstract concept? Well, this requires a little bit of mental development. Locke says that, you don't get to this until you're a little older. At first, you see a kitty and you can identify it as kitty if you've been taught. But as you get a little older, and you see a bunch of kitties, and they're different colors and different sizes, you can start to abstract away from the individual concrete examples of kitty, of cat. Imagine a cat with no color, right? You can't really imagine a cat with no color. When I say A on the front of it, I'm talking about an individual example. I say, imagine a cat with no color. And you're like, I can't do it. If I'm thinking of a cat, I'm thinking of a cat that has some color. Because all cats that actually exist have some color. But I can form the abstract idea of cat in general, the category cat, by subtracting out the things that differ among the individual examples, like the exact size. Right? I know that cats in general are within a certain range of sizes, that's about it. I know that they have a variety of colors, but they share a lot of other common attributes, a general shape, a general build, a general temperament. These things are all common to cats for the most part. And so I can build up an abstract idea that is, in a sense, less than the concrete ideas I have, the concrete complex ideas that I have. It has fewer features specified in my abstract complex idea. But because it has fewer features specified, it encompasses all of the concrete examples. Okay. Now that's an abstract idea that relates to a bunch of concrete ideas. What about things that are purely in the abstract? Like a unicorn. There are no concrete examples of a unicorn. How could I possibly get the complex idea of unicorn in my head? Well, Locke says, look, we have the power of imagination. We can mix and match the various bits and pieces. I take the features of a horse, and I jam a horn on its head, and I don't know, farts, rainbows, whatever you think unicorns do. I've come up with a category, much in the same way I came up with a category for cat. I've come up with a category that has no corresponding concrete examples. But that doesn't mean I can't come up with the abstract category, right? I can even imagine what a concrete example would look like. I can come up with a concrete, or what would maybe be, could be a concrete example of a unicorn, even if no such thing exists. Just in the same way that I can imagine a cat in all of the specificity I want, the color of its fur, the length of its fur, its size, and so on and so forth. I can imagine a cat, even when no cat actually exists, to put physics in my face and create an impression on my brain. Because I have the ability to form and take apart and mix and match these simple ideas and form them into new complex ideas, some of which are associated with actual concrete examples and some of which are not. Okay. Now finally, let's go to the really abstract stuff, like concepts of freedom and love. You can't see love as a concept. You can see acts of love, but you can't see love as a concept. You can't see freedom as a concept. You can see acts of freedom. Well, Locke says that works pretty much the way the cat thing does, right? If I start to think that there's a common theme that unites these particular actions, bringing flowers, putting a blanket over somebody, kissing them on the forehead, telling them how much they mean to me, so on and so forth, then those things are acts of love, and I can form this abstract, complex idea of love, that there's an emotion that is felt, that is inspiring people to act these ways, right? I can't see it, I can't experience it directly, but I can't experience the category of cat directly either. I can't experience unicorns directly either. It doesn't stop me from having those abstract, complex ideas in my head. Okay, so Locke has given us an example, or a theory rather, of how we form beliefs in a way that makes those beliefs justified, right? Because I can form beliefs in a way that makes them non-justified, right? Let's say I'm looking around and there is no physics going into my face that would indicate the presence of a cat. But I still form a belief there's a cat. Well, something has gone wrong, right? That belief has no justification, has no foundation. It doesn't connect back. There's no story to tell about how that belief gets back to some operation of my senses. Because even abstract ideas like freedom and love in Locke's account and the other empiricists' accounts ultimately leads back to a story of something that went in physics that went into your face, of some kind of sensory stimuli. You witnessed an act of love. Somebody does something. You say, why did you do that? You say, love. And they go, oh. And then they see similar things and they ask, why did you do that? Someone goes, love. And they start to form, there's this abstract category, this abstract concept of love, and that it sort of underpins all of this. Just like if I look at a bunch of cats and I form the concept of cat as a category. I never see the category directly, just because I never see love directly. I see only individual cats, individual acts of love. But I have united my individual experiences of cats under a conceptual rubric. Same thing with acts of love. I've united those under a conceptual rubric. Okay, so Locke seems to have it all figured out. Empiricism tells a story of how we get beliefs and which ones of those beliefs are justified. Now, notice, though, that, as I said earlier, justification and truth are not inseparably linked. Locke talks at no small length about optical illusions and things that can trick the eye and can trick you into forming beliefs that aren't true. Are those beliefs justified? Well, there's two ways of thinking about that. One is, yeah, they are justified because most beliefs of that kind are justified, and you're just going to have to live with it, right? Knowledge is fallible. Sometimes you think you know something because you have justification to believe it, and it turns out not to be true, and oh well. It happens occasionally. We form beliefs that are perfectly justified in the context of their formation, but they're still wrong. There you go. They're fallibilists about knowledge formation, which means their account of knowledge is comfortable with the idea that sometimes you will form beliefs that look very much like true beliefs, knowledge beliefs, and yet they aren't. It happens. The rationalists, of course, are non-fallibilists. The only way to get a justified belief is if that belief is analytically or deductively true, which means it can't possibly be false. So there is never going to be an instance of you forming a belief that you accurately think is justified and it turned out to be false. Unless you are just confused about whether your belief is, unless you make an error in thinking that this belief is justified, you're never going to be mistaken about what is knowledge, what is known, and what is not known. Okay. The empiricists introduced a certain level of uncertainty into our world. Since Aristotle, knowledge was taken to be the highest form of belief. It was taken to be, if you know something, then it's certain. You never have to doubt it. But the empiricists said you can think you know something and be wrong. and be wrong in a justifiable sense, which is to say, you didn't make any mistakes, you didn't do anything incorrect, you were doing your best, it just so happened to work that way, because the world is, messed up. The other way of thinking about it is this, is that you can have an empiricist picture of the world and still say, yeah, you're justified with sort of the information that you have, but if you had full and complete information about a situation, you would never be justified in believing something that wasn't true. Like the fake cat, right? The fake cat, which is designed to fool me, and very well designed it is. It creates a situation where physics goes in my face, I form a belief that there's a cat. Normally, when I see something that looks like that, it is a cat, so I feel justified. But the belief isn't true, because it's a fake cat, it's a trap. And you could say, as an empiricist, that if I had all the information, it would never turn out that an untrue thing is justified. Right. If I knew, if I had the information that that was a fake cat, I would go, well, it certainly looks like a cat, but it's not. Yeah. And I wouldn't form the belief that's a cat. Okay. And this, of course, this way of looking at it gets the empiricists out of their quandary a little bit. They say, no, look, if we were like God and we had all the information available to us, then it would never turn out that untrue things are justified. Untrue things are never justified is another way of saying it in the big picture. So at that point, they're kind of like Cartesians, they're kind of like rationalists, in the sense that an untrue thing is never justified. But for all practical purposes, humans being limited, yeah, untrue things are going to look like they're justified a whole lot. You live with it. So why would we accept a theory of knowledge that tells us you're going to be wrong? Right? Just you have to accept this right out of the gate, that you're going to be wrong sometimes. Sometimes you're going to think a belief is justified, and it's going to happen in the way that other justified beliefs happen, and yet it's still going to turn out not to be true. Why would we accept a theory of knowledge that introduces such uncertainty? The rationalists gave us a theory of knowledge where nothing that was untrue ever turned out to be justified. Well, why don't we go there, right? Why don't we go to eat there? Rationalist Cafe. My new business idea. I eat, therefore I am. Why would we prefer empiricism? Well, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, as you might have surmised by now, empiricists kind of won the argument. I mean, I hate to say it, but they did. We live in a world dominated by the concept of empiricism. If my description of how people form beliefs under the empiricist paradigm, if my description of that sounded familiar, it's because it is familiar. That's how cognitive psychologists think we form beliefs, more or less. There's some more nuance to it, but generally speaking, physics goes in our face, it creates an impression on the brain, and we attach a conceptual content to that. That's just that's how all this crap works, man. The second reason we might prefer it, aside from fidelity to the actual biological account of human experience, is that it doesn't require any kind of external theological commitment. If you were a Cartesian, you could get on board with the idea that we had knowledge of the external world if you were a Christian. That's a lot of extra baggage to drag into your account of knowledge. You'd be like, man, I just want to know how I know that's a cat, right? I just want to know why I know that's a cat. And Descartes' like, okay, I can tell you, but first, do you believe in God? And I'm like, dude, that's not even what we're talking about, man. That's a lot of extra weight you're taking on, unnecessarily so. The third reason that we might prefer an empiricist account, aside from fidelity to the actual biological account and the fact that it doesn't bring in a lot of extra baggage, metaphysically speaking, the third reason we might prefer an empiricist account is that it's very easy to see under the empiricist account how we get knowledge of the external world. Right? It's easy. Knowledge is cheap and easy. All I have to do is point my eyes at something. My eyes generally work reliably under most circumstances. The physics go in my face. It forms an impression on my brain. I go, kitty. And voila, I know that there's a kitty sleeping in my chair. Knowledge is cheap and easy. Knowledge for Descartes is a massive intellectual production. It requires the ability to do logical deduction accurately. You have to have all this other stuff happening. It has very little to do with the senses, actually, and it's of dubious accuracy, right? If you don't buy into any number of premises that Descartes considers important, then you're stuck having to admit that, well, I mean, I think I see a cat, but who knows, right? Where are your keys? I don't know, because I don't believe in God. Right? That sounds batshit. Not to put too fine a point on it. It's bonkers. I don't know where my keys are, because I don't believe in God. I mean, come on. The empiricist account was attractive to people because knowledge was cheap and easy. It was a simple account. It did not include massive amounts of additional metaphysical baggage, and it seemed to track well with the mechanical, biological facts about how humans operate. It was an account that was rooted in the reality of the world as we understood it. It wasn't way up here in the abstract. It wasn't up in some abstruse realm where we have to do theology before we know where our keys are. It was right here. It was concrete. And so people liked it. And we live in the empiricist age. Quite frankly, the vast majority of people sort of reflexively assume an empiricist epistemology, even if they don't know what those words mean. You ask them, why do you think there's a cat over there? And they're like, I can see it. Weirdo. And that's an empiricist kind of comment. Why do you think there's a cat over there? Because I can see it. Weirdo. Call lots of people weirdos. He did not, but I feel like he should have. Anyway, so empiricism has kind of taken over the world in terms of an account of knowledge. So what do we have to say about criticism, though? Why should we not be empiricists? Well, honestly, there aren't a lot of great reasons not to be an empiricist. You probably should be an empiricist. But there are a few things that still trip people up. First of all, as Locke pointed out, when you get into the abstract concepts like cat or love or freedom or whatever, beauty, what have you, well, I mean, even the concrete complex objects, or complex concepts. What if there was a person that called themselves mom the whole time you were a baby, and you learned to refer to them as mom because you associate the colors and shapes and everything like that happen in front of your face, and when the physics go in your face, it forms an impression on your brain, and you hear that word, and you associate that word and the conceptual content of mom with that sensory impression. But what if they weren't? What if you were kidnapped as a baby and you were raised to, I don't know, be a elite assassin or something? Whatever, I don't know. The point being, Locke points out that you can learn wrongly, or you can learn things that are maybe not wrong, but different, right? Certainly, if I learn the word for mom in English, and a German person learns the word Mutter, right, and a French person learns the word mère, none of us are wrong, right? We are correct within a certain scope of consideration. In this area, it's called mère, mother. In that area, it's called Mutter, mother. In English-speaking areas, it's called mother, or mom, or whatever, mommy, what have you. But I can learn incorrectly. What if I had a child and maliciously taught that child all the wrong things? Like every time it saw a dog, I said it was a cat. And every time it saw a cat, I said that was a dog. You know, my child would grow up, at least to the point where they get in kindergarten, and then things get really confusing. But for a while, that child would misidentify dog and cat. And Locke says, yeah, that can happen. And the Cartesians are pulling their hair out here. They're like, oh my God. And he's like, no, it happens. He said that ideas like love and beauty and things like that, these are just cultural constructs, right? Different societies will take different kinds of things and lump them together under that concept. And maybe love looks one way to one society or to one person, and it looks a different way to another society or another person. Who's right? Locke says neither of them are right. That abstract concepts, complex concepts, are just names that we stick on bundles of ideas. And, you know, there's no right or wrong about it. We just do, right? I mean, maybe there's a right or wrong about it in the sense of society disagrees with you about this. Like if I constantly refer to cats as dogs and vice versa. But beyond that, there really isn't. There's no right or wrong about it. And a lot of people find that deeply unsettling. A lot of rationalists in particular say, no. There must be some objectively correct idea of love and beauty and whatever. This is usually attached to some kind of religious sentiment, right? Where, like, for instance, if, you know, Descartes was a believer in the Christian God, he couldn't just concede the concept of love as a social construct, right? Because love is a defining attribute of this cosmic being, and it has an objective meaning. It can't be just whatever each society decides it is. Right? Descartes, there's no way he'd be okay with that. Whereas under empiricism, that's all you got. Right? So, some people, due to prior metaphysical commitments, are uncomfortable with empiricism because it seems to indicate that certain things that they feel should have an objective, stable meaning. Well, let's put it this way. It can't tell us a story about how those things might have an objective, stable meaning. Right? In fact, this leads into the other part, which is, if you're an empiricist, how will you ever come to the idea of God? Well, if you're an empiricist, you can certainly cobble together the concepts. You can imagine God, right? But obviously that's a heretical notion for many believers. They're saying, I'm not just imagining this thing, it's real, right? This thing I believe in, it's very, very real. But again, if no physics go in the face, empiricists are struggling to explain how you justifiably form a belief about God's existence, right? You can imagine a God just like you can imagine a unicorn. But just because I cannot justifiably form a belief that a unicorn is present, then under empiricism, it's very difficult to see how I would justifiably form a belief that God is present. And in fact, it starts to look like under empiricism, God is another abstract concept that is just taught culturally in the same way that love and freedom and what have you are. That it's just something that you learn about. And it's not connected to any concrete examples of anything. Rationalism, on the other hand, can make arguments, can make very definite arguments. Descartes started with it, right? Descartes starts off with his rationalist argument that you can have a justified belief that God is real because you follow certain deductive steps and it comes out to be deductively true that God is real. You're like, okay, cool. So he must be. Empiricists are like, no, that doesn't, it's not necessarily true. I mean, they believe in deduction, sure, but deduction is only as good as the premises you put into it. And since the premises all wind up coming from concepts that you either invent or that you create by abstracting away from concrete examples, then you could be wrong about those concepts. Maybe your concrete examples, maybe you abstracted away the wrong things. Like maybe early in life, all the cats you saw were gray. And they were different sizes, but they were all gray. So you wrongly came to believe that while cats could be of different sizes, they were all gray. You abstracted away the wrong elements. You didn't abstract away enough to get to the concept of cat as a category. What if when you were young you learned that love primarily consists of giving people chewing gum, right? That you learned a weird concept of love, right? Giving people chewing gum. So love is. You learn, I wouldn't mind so much. I like chewing gum, I guess. Don't really chew it, but I don't have anything against it. I'll probably resell it. Anyway, point is, because you can wrongly abstract, you can abstract incorrectly, or you can abstract in a way that has no connection to reality, like in conceiving of a unicorn. Your premises might be garbage, hot garbage, and if your premises are garbage, it doesn't matter how good your deductive logic is, your conclusion is garbage too. It's just the way deduction works. So, those are some reasons why you might be sketchy about empiricism. It does not have a story to tell about objectively true abstracts. Like if you think there's an objective definition of love, man, you're gonna have to get really creative to explain how you might come to be acquainted with that, how you might form a belief, how the belief about love that is correct as opposed to incorrect gets into your head in the first place. Because if it doesn't come in through your senses or as a secondary operation on the stuff gathered by your senses, then yeah, that's empiricism doesn't have any other tricks up its sleeve, right? And the empiricists insist that we are born blank slates with no concepts. Now, Kant and some later thinkers would try to hybridize the two views. They're basically empiricists, but they argue that maybe we do come with some preloaded stuff. But even if you're going to say there is some preloaded stuff in the brain, and there's good biological evidence of that now, that babies have like a sort of rudimentary understanding of physics because our brains are just built that way, which makes sense. In our evolutionary environment, that would make sense. If you're going to argue that, you still have to provide an argument as to why those innate beliefs are correct, right? Descartes said the innate beliefs were correct because God put them there and God can be trusted, and we know that because of blah, 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 deduction. But if we go that route, then we are sacrificing one of the main strengths of empiricism. We are giving up on its simplicity. We're bringing in all that extra metaphysical baggage that goes with it. So, I don't know. I think empiricism is a pretty good account. It seems a very plausible account of how we form beliefs and which beliefs are justified, and therefore which beliefs count as knowledge. The tricky parts about empiricism are that it seems to be a relativistic account in terms of certain abstract ideas like love, beauty, freedom, God, things like that. Those seem to be just like there's no way that even if there was an objective truth about these things, how would we know it? Right? How would we get a justifiable belief about the objective truth? That's one problem. So there's kind of skepticism in that regard. And the other problem is that empiricism, you just have to be comfortable with the idea that sometimes you're going to have a belief that seems justified, and it is justified under normal operating circumstances, but it doesn't turn out to be true, right? That what you think is knowledge is sometimes going to turn out to not be knowledge. Rationalists don't have to worry about that. Rationalists are always like, no, I know this. You're like, are you sure? They're like, yeah, I'm a rationalist. Duh. But empiricists are like, I know this. They're like, are you sure? They're like, 80, 90%. So, it's the best we can do. Okay. Hopefully this helped you understand empiricism a little bit better. Further videos are coming, as always. Always cranking out new videos because I got to do my treadmill time every day, so might as well crank out new videos, right? All right. Y'all have a good day, and I will talk to you next time.